Listen to me, woman of destiny. I'm talking to the one who cried in silence, served in secret, endured betrayal with grace, and kept showing up when no one clapped. I'm talking to the one whose voice was overlooked, dismissed, and even mocked. But God whispered something about you in the corridors of eternity. She's not done. She's just being hidden until it's time to be revealed. You see, when God is about to elevate someone publicly, he often allows them to be silenced privately, because the silence is not your prison, it is your preparation. The people who tried to silence you weren't powerful. They were prophetic without knowing it. They had to reject you so heaven could redirect you. They had to push you aside so God could pull you into alignment with your real assignment. Detachment is a divine strategy. When God calls you higher, he begins by disconnecting your emotions from anything that can dilute your focus. You're not cold, you're being consecrated. You're not bitter, you're being built. Don't mistake emotional detachment for hardness of heart. It is evidence that your spirit has matured beyond needing applause to feel anchored. You are beginning to understand that purpose doesn't beg to be seen. It prepares in silence until heaven says, now. Woman, when they silenced you, God wasn't absent. He was watching. He was refining your character, building your discernment, stretching your faith. He let them walk away, not because you were worthless, but because their presence could not coexist with your purpose. He cut the emotional cord so you wouldn't need their validation when he exposes you to nations. And this time, they won't be able to silence what God has ordained to speak. They thought your silence was a sign that they had won. They believed your withdrawal meant defeat. But what they didn't see was that heaven had placed a divine pause over your life, not to punish you, but to prepare you. In the eyes of man, your voice was dismissed, your value questioned, and your influence ignored. But in the realm of the spirit, God was orchestrating a greater unveiling. Silence was never your sentence. It was your strategy. God hid you in the shadows, not because you were unworthy of the spotlight, but because what you carry needed sacred incubation. The world wants instant exposure, but heaven demands preparation. You were not forgotten. You were preserved. While they were trying to diminish you, God was developing you. Your silence became the soil where strength took root. Your tears became the water that nourished a deeper level of wisdom. Your stillness became the womb for revelation. And now your voice carries weight, not because it's loud, but because it has been baptized in fire. The delay wasn't denial. It was divine. They silenced you, thinking you were done speaking. But they didn't realize that God was giving you a new language, not of pain, but of purpose, not of bitterness, but of breakthrough. You don't emerge from this season the same. You rise with a presence that cannot be denied. What they tried to mute has become your mantle. The quiet seasons weren't empty. They were divine classrooms. And now when you speak from a place of authority that only comes through silence. God doesn't waste the hush. He uses it to sharpen the voice that will soon shake atmospheres. They tried to silence you, but what they didn't know is that heaven was simply adjusting your volume. Before elevation, there must be separation. This is a principle woven throughout every story of divine promotion. God never lifts a person publicly without first dealing with them privately. And one of the ways he initiates this process is through separation. Not always physical, but emotional, mental, and spiritual detachment from what no longer aligns with your next dimension. You see, what's comfortable can become a cage. And sometimes the people, places, and patterns that were once necessary for your growth can become obstacles to your purpose. So God begins to sever ties, not to isolate you, but to insulate the calling he placed within you. Elevation is heavy. It demands clarity, and clarity doesn't come in noise. It comes in stillness. That's why God will start removing distractions, masked as friendships, opportunities, disguised as obligations and environments that feed your past but choke your future. You'll feel it before you understand it. Conversations won't satisfy you anymore. Relationships won't connect like they used to. The same rooms that once felt like home will now feel like confinement. That is not confusion. It is a divine shift. It's heaven pulling you away from everything familiar. Not because you're better than them, but because you're being called to something higher than them. This is not rejection, it's refinement. You're not being abandoned. You're being appointed. God doesn't ask for your agreement. He initiates separation for your protection. The emotional distance you feel is heaven's signal that promotion is near. You cannot carry dead weight into divine destiny. So let the separation come. Let the quiet form. Let the space between what was and what will be stretch you. For it is in that holy tension that God creates the capacity you need to carry the weight of where you're going. Spiritual detachment is one of the most misunderstood moves of God. It feels like loss, like abandonment, like something has been taken from you. But in truth, it is not rejection, it is refinement. When God begins to separate your heart from things that once brought comfort, He is not punishing you, He is purifying you. He is shifting your source of strength from people and external circumstances to His voice and His presence. What once affirmed you is now silent. What once excited you now feels empty. That is not a crisis. That is clarity. God is teaching you how to walk by revelation, not by reaction. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop depending. It means your soul is no longer entangled in the approval, attention, or validation of others. You love without clinging. You serve without striving. You give without expecting applause. That's not coldness, it's consecration. You've outgrown emotional entanglements that kept you tied to seasons God already ended. When your spirit matures, your emotions learn to submit. You stop feeding what no longer grows you. You stop explaining your worth. You stop performing for acceptance. Because now your eyes are fixed on something greater, something eternal. This is the kind of refinement that prepares you for public elevation. It's not about isolation. It's about transformation. God cannot elevate what is still emotionally dependent on human affirmation. He must strip you of attachments that conflict with your assignment. That's why certain relationships fade. That's why old circles become uncomfortable. That's why what used to fulfill you now feels frustrating. You're not empty. You're being made whole. Detachment is the evidence that God is removing the noise so you can hear His voice clearly. You are not being disconnected from people. You're being reconnected to purpose. There is a bold confidence that rises in a woman who knows she's already been approved by heaven. It's not arrogance. It's not pride. It's alignment. When your identity is rooted in who God says you are, not in how others respond to you, you move differently. You're not swayed by the opinions of people because your validation doesn't come from crowds, it comes from the Creator. You stop living to be seen and start living to be significant. There is a depth in your steps and a stillness in your soul because you understand that you were called before you were ever celebrated. People's approval is fleeting. Today they love you, tomorrow they misunderstand you. One moment you're the inspiration, the next you're their target. But when you are anchored in divine purpose, those shifts don't shake you. You've already been accepted in the beloved. You were chosen before anyone had the power to reject you. That's why you don't flinch when doors close or voices fade. Because you know, if heaven said yes, no earthly system can override it. This confidence doesn't make you loud. It makes you secure. You don't have to defend your name, prove your worth, or chase recognition. You walk with quiet authority, knowing that your presence is not accidental. It's intentional. When you enter a room, you carry purpose. When you speak, you release weight. When you act, you operate under divine authorization. You're not looking for platforms. You're stewarding assignments. You're not chasing applause. You're following the anointing. And because you know who sent you, you're not threatened by who ignores you. The spotlight doesn't define you. The secret place refines you. Your confidence is not built on compliments. It's anchored in the covenant God made with you before anyone knew your name. When a woman understands her assignment, she no longer bends under the weight of accusation. She rises above it, because when God places something eternal within you, no temporal opposition can cancel it. Your assignment will always be louder than their assumptions, their rumors, their attempts to discredit you. What God has planted in your spirit speaks a language that cuts through noise. It doesn't need validation. It carries revelation. And when that revelation begins to manifest, even your enemies will have to acknowledge the evidence of God's hand on your life. You were never created to live according to people's opinions. You were created to fulfill a divine agenda. And that agenda cannot be aborted by gossip, betrayal, or sabotage. In fact, every attack against your voice has only confirmed its power. They tried to silence you because they sensed what was coming before you even understood it. Their resistance was a sign that your voice carried authority. Your ideas stirred atmospheres. Your presence disrupted systems. You didn't fit their mold, and that frightened them. But your difference is not a threat. It's your divine distinction. Purpose provokes persecution. Every time heaven anoints a woman to rise, hell sends voices to accuse. But your resilience isn't fueled by revenge. It's rooted in revelation. You don't retaliate. You release. You don't shrink. You shine, because your life is not about proving them wrong. It's about proving God right. He chose you, not because you were flawless, but because you were faithful. And now, even in the face of accusation, you keep moving, because your eyes are on the assignment, not the applause. Your ears are tuned to heaven, not human noise. And your steps are ordered, not by fear, but by purpose. The enemy didn't attack you randomly. He targeted what he knew would change the world. You were never just going through trials. You were carrying revelation. Every season of silence, every moment of isolation, every tear you cried behind closed doors was not wasted. God was downloading something into your spirit that required separation from the noise of the crowd. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned. What others saw as weakness, heaven saw as readiness. You were learning how to hear God without needing applause, how to stand without needing affirmation, and how to speak without waiting for permission. That kind of revelation can't be learned in comfort. It is forged in fire. They mistook your silence for surrender, but you were never a victim. You were a steward. You were managing the weight of what God was pouring into you. You carried truth in the dark, wisdom in the wilderness, power in the places where no one was watching. And now what once felt like hiding is about to become highlighting. God doesn't reveal what hasn't first been refined. That's why your voice has been tested. That's why your strength has been stretched. That's why your heart had to be broken and rebuilt. So when he elevates you, you'll speak from a place of power, not performance. You're not just someone with experiences. You are someone with insight. You carry a message that was born in pain, but will release healing. You carry a story that was shaped in silence, but will echo with glory. Heaven has entrusted you with more than survival. It has assigned you with impact. You weren't silenced to be forgotten. You were silenced to be trusted. And now what once broke you will build others. What once silenced you will become your sound. You are not a woman coming back with revenge. You are a woman rising with revelation. Elevation is never just about being lifted higher. It's about being made ready to carry more. God doesn't elevate people for visibility. He elevates them for responsibility. The purpose of your promotion isn't to escape what hurt you, but to master it with wisdom, grace, and divine authority. What you went through didn't break you. It built capacity in you. And now what once overwhelmed you, you will rule over with clarity and discernment. That's why the process was so intense. That's why the silence was so deep. Because God wasn't just preparing you for a new level. He was preparing you to carry it without collapsing under it. When God elevates a woman, he does so because she has learned how to chew at pain without becoming bitter, how to walk through fire without losing her identity, and how to hear his voice above every other voice. You weren't just surviving, you were mastering spiritual authority in the unseen realms. And now you emerge not as someone who escaped the storm, but as someone who learned to command peace in the midst of it. This kind of elevation demands a heart that's no longer tethered to applause. It demands a spirit that can lead without needing to be liked. It requires emotional detachment, not from people, but from the need to please them. Because when you rise, your decisions must flow from purpose, not pressure. You've been trained to endure criticism, to walk alone when necessary, to speak truth when it's unpopular. And that training wasn't in vain. God is about to place you in rooms where your presence alone will shift atmospheres. Not because you're seeking recognition, but because you've become the manifestation of what you've survived. You are not being elevated as an escape from hardship. You are being elevated as evidence of mastery. Woman, you were never overlooked, only hidden for the right time. You were never silenced, only preserved for a greater sound. Heaven has not only seen, yet has marked you. What you thought was the end was simply the turning of the page. What felt like rejection was divine redirection. Now the same voice they tried to suppress will echo with purpose. The same woman they tried to break will rise with fire in her bones and authority in her stride. You are not just coming back, you are being launched. And this time, your elevation will not be quiet, accidental, or hidden. It will be undeniable. It will be public. It will be God ordained. Because when heaven decides to lift a woman, no force on earth can keep her down. This is not your comeback. This is your unveiling. Step forward. The silence is over. God is about to make you heard.